I wanted to take the opportunity to touch base a little bit on the accusations that some of the data being presented is not factual, when in fact it came from the Franklin County GIS system folks, right? So there's been no manipulation of the data whatsoever, not in terms of accuracy. So I'm going to open up, or I have open here, just a flat out empty browser, and I'm going to search for Franklin County Mo GIS, and I'm going to hit enter. And that is going to bring us to the search result, which is you're going to see franklincountymo.org, which is their site. I'm going to click it. It's going to take us to their GIS site. You can read through here. I mean, it just gives you some information about their hardware, software, and data, and how the data maps are stored with its various layers. I used to work in GIS for a short time, many years ago, so I have some background in how this works. However, down towards the middle there, you see new in 2018, you can now access our GIS maps online, and you can click that link. When you click that link, it's going to take you to their GIS system, which is slow. I'm going to warn you up front. If you decide to go to their GIS system, it is not going to be a super pleasant experience. In all likelihood, it is not your internet connection. They are promising some upgrades coming soon, but we'll see. Those types of technology upgrades are typically pretty slow. But again, it's important to reiterate that we are utilizing the Franklin County information. And I'm going to also use this as an opportunity to try and explain how this works. So when it loads, you're going to be presented with this map, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up we'll get more into what's going on the left pane here shortly. I'm going to pull this map up. I'm going to clicking and holding the mouse button and just pulling up. And you'll see this little indicator down there that says it's loading. It's kind of important that you let that finish before you try and do anything else, because the system is kind of old and slow and has a tendency to crash if you push it too hard. So I'm going to pull it up again and one more time, and you'll see why in a minute that I'm pulling it up so high and to the left. I've done this a few times. I'm going to double click in the area that I know Lake Saint Clair to be, which is right there. I'm going to double click again. And then I'm going to pull it back over. I'm going to wait for the indicator to get done first. And then I'm going to grab the map by pressing and holding the mouse button and pull it back over. Wait for the indicator to finish. And then I'm going to double click. And I'm going to pull it back over. Waiting for that indicator to finish. And then I'm going to double click into the area in question. The area that was brought into question by a member of the group. So I'm going to double click, pull it over. I didn't really wait like I should have, but I'm going to wait now because I know better. You're going to notice these water features. We'll talk about turning those off in just a minute, because they actually will cover up some of the land and things like that we want to see. So now it's still loading, and sometimes this can take some time, and sometimes it's not as fast as you would like it to be. You just got to roll with it, and you got to be patient, because if you're not patient, you can end up crashing the system in such a way that, like, for example, if it crashes on Saturday, it will not be back up until Monday, potentially. That's happened to me once. And it holds a lot of useful information, and I like to try and keep that information available to me when I need it. So now that it's loaded, you see some of the boundary lines and things have loaded. I'm going to zoom in again by just simply double clicking, pull it back over. I didn't wait, I probably should have, but I'm going to wait now because I know better. But right now, this information is relatively useless in terms of property boundary type information, but we're going to change that over in the left-hand pane momentarily whenever it's done loading. So now you can see all this information. You can see the roads, you can see the water features, you can see all the different lot boundaries with different colors, the purple, the pastel. It's not very useful for what we want to do, not for this mission. So we're going to go over to the left here, and when you see that natural features, it may or not be expanded. If it isn't, just expand base map, and then uncheck that natural features, and that water will disappear. And that doesn't seem relevant now, but it will in the future. But again, this is still not very useful to us. So we're going to go over here where it says land, and when you first click it, you're going to see that this little up arrow appears. And when you try and uncheck that or expand that box, you're going to see that this menu like slides up on you. So what you want to do is just hover the mouse ever so gently over that bottom frame, press and hold the mouse button, pull it down out of your way, and it shouldn't happen again. Some kind of a bug in their software. So now we're going to expand land, and then we are going to uncheck subdivision. That kind of seems counterintuitive, but now what's going to happen is you're going to see all these property boundaries and things in a different fashion. Now it's not done loading, but there it is. So now you see all these property boundaries and the roads and all the related things. But it's still not very useful to us. So we're going to add one more detail. See, these are all property lines, all the things I'm hovering over there. So now we're going to go over to the left-hand pane, and we're going to check that franklincounty.sid box. And what that's going to do is that's going to overlay the satellite imagery so we can see the property lines over the image. Now it's important to note, if I haven't already, these lines can be off 2 to 3 feet in either direction, right? It's a complete possibility. The only way to really know if your lines are accurate or where your lines are is to have the property staked. And it's my unprofessional opinion that that is the responsibility of the property owner, not of somebody that wants to use common ground. So if you look over here, I'm going to pull it back over. After I double clicked and zoomed in, there's this shaft. We're going to wait for it to load before we do anything else. We don't want to upset it. There's this shaft right here next to or in between these two houses. Waiting for it to load. That's a property line, period. Those are property lines right there. That's a property line. That is a property line. The stuff in between those property lines is common ground. Those people do not own it. That's a property line right there. I wish I could change the colors to like a bright pink or something, and you probably can, and I'll investigate that later. But for now, I don't know how to do it. So, with that being said, everything in between those lines is common ground. It's not up for somebody to say, I question that. I mean, it's the law. So everything out there is common ground. Now, if your property, well, we'll get in that in a minute, but where my mouse cursor is right now is common ground. That's common ground. I don't know who built it. I don't know how it got there. I don't know if it was the trustees or the current homeowner. I can certainly look into that, but I find it hard to believe that the current homeowner built that because the shaft was already there. They put that shaft there by design for people to have access to common areas of the lake. That is my opinion. And I'm pretty sure I'm right. And we'll get into more of that shortly. So I'm going to pull it over here a little bit. And you're going to notice this property line goes out into the water. And that's true. But his property technically goes out into that water. But my understanding, my unprofessional opinion, and understanding of the law is that anything beyond that wall where the water is, no one can tell you not to be there, whether it's his property or not. That's not how that works. In the state of Missouri, in particular, if a creek or a river claims part of your property, you can't fill it back in. I don't know how it works for a property and subdivision, but you are not allowed to fill it back in. I don't know why that is, but from personal experience, I know that to be true. Now, with this, I don't know if it was that way when they bought the lot. I have no idea.
But I can tell you they can't tell you to stay out of the water. Now, another member of the group had stated that their parents' property went 5 or 6 feet out in the water, so I decided to look into this to see if there's any truth whatsoever, because that's what I do. And I pull over to those lots, and lo and behold, to my shock, there's 6 feet or more of their lots in the water. Now, again, they cannot prevent you from swimming in the water right up to the shoreline. And I don't believe they would. I don't believe they're those kind of people. But you cannot or should not go onto the shore, onto their property from the lake, because that is their property. That's my opinion. I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to try and be confrontational with someone, generally. So, moving across the lake, this is an interesting area, because everything behind that blue property line up there, all these things, all these buildings, all these sidewalks, all the docks, everything is on common ground. They don't own it. I don't care how they shake a stick at it. I don't care what their argument is. They don't own it. And interestingly enough, there's a shaft that leads to this common ground area. Now, I don't know who owns that lot that I'm hovering over right now. I think the trustees do, and it just hasn't been replatted correctly. That's something I've just started to look into, but I'm pretty sure they mow that lot, which is what led me to believe that they own it. But either way, if you access that common ground from this little porthole right here where the number 1 is, that means you're able to access all this common ground. All of it, all the way to the edge. And I don't care if you're a lawyer, a cop, a doctor, a judge, whatever. The law is the law. And the law says common ground is common ground. So here's this shaft. I couldn't figure this out. I'm going to show you something. This shaft was easy to figure out. It goes to the road. You can park up there and you can get access to the lake. Right? What I couldn't understand is the shaft above it. There's a shaft that goes up into this area that is not technically considered part of the development. And that area is where the original developer lived, is what I have been told. And that shaft makes sense, because the original developer could have gone down the shaft where that shed sits right in the center of it now, and just done a slightly jagged motion and continued on in their golf cart or on foot down to the lake. Makes absolute sense. I totally understood why that second shaft was there after I understood who and what was going on up there. So as we go over here, there's a real skeet or thin part right there in the corner. You'd have to walk into the water to get around, but once you get around that, you're technically on common ground, as long as you stay off their property. I don't care who you are. The law is the law. So we're just going along here, and as you can see, more common ground. Pull this over a little bit. Again, I'm trying to be patient with it, because if you go too fast, it will break. So here's another area that is not technically accessible from the road, but it is common ground. So if you wanted to, yeah, you could pull your boat up, jump up there, go fishing, swim off the edge, whatever you wanted to do. I wouldn't do it, but you could do it. It is common ground. So where that little boathouse is back there is not only on common ground, but it's right at the edge of their property line. So another interesting one. There's another shaft here that comes out to an area that is very small, but common ground. And my guess would be, as shallow as that area is over there, because I've been over there on my jet ski, that used to be a beachhead where people could go and enjoy their time on the beach, that we could easily fill that back in. There's another lot that goes into the water as well. But that whole area I just circled could and probably should be a beachhead. I believe not long ago at all that I recall seeing that there was quite a bit of sand over there. Not sure where it all went. Probably got washed away. But that is common area, common ground. So there's some more lots that have property in the water that, again, if it were me, I would fill it in if I could get away with it, just so that I had as much land as I could have. Much room as I could have, I should say. There's another example where the mouse cursor is. So you're humming along, and you've got more common ground right up ahead of us here. Again, you could not access that common ground from the road. Not at first glance, anyway. I don't see any shafts to go down to it. But if you wanted to pull your boat up or your jet ski up and for whatever reason hang out over there, it's common ground, period. So once again, we have more lots that go off into the water. And here you have, oops, I didn't mean to do that. You have an area that's a really good example to pull, right? The reason that this is a good example is look how far these lots go in to the water. These lots are almost non-existent. You could own all three of those lots and barely have enough room to build a house, a good-sized house that I would want to live in if I ever did it again. But what's the difference between the peninsula there and the common ground below? The answer is there is no difference. Common ground is common ground. Zoom out a little bit to accentuate my argument. So that's common ground, that's common ground. There's no difference between the two. They are not owned by one individual property owner. Those lots over there used to be lots, but they were donated to Lake Saint Clair, just have not been replatted correctly. A matter I do intend to take up with Franklin County when I have the chance. It makes me curious if we're paying taxes on those as a development when they're common ground for a not-for-profit, and I don't believe taxes apply the same way. So that's common ground, that's common ground, that's common ground. They're all the same common ground. I'm not sure how much clearer the picture can be painted for the people that do not believe. So here we are, going down the road. Clearly there's an issue there with the road that we should probably address in the future. So this lot here was always puzzling to me because the previous owner, I believe he sold it, used to tell me all the time that that little bitty 25.1 lot encompassed a whole bunch of common ground, like way over to here-ish, which I now know to not be true unless there's something wrong with Franco GIS. So coming over here further, this is all common ground next to the road. Nobody owns that. No one individual owns it. Common ground, all of that. I don't care who cuts it. See that property line? That is their boundary. They do not own anything beyond that boundary. There's an interesting phenomenon over there at 242, but we'll get into that in another video. So there's a trustee that lives in here that was making the statement that their shorehead eroded 16 feet, and that if you came behind the house, you'd be trespassing because there was no common ground. And clearly, as you can see right here, that's not true. There's probably almost over 16 feet there. But again, this can be off 2 or 3 feet either direction. But that line, that's their boundary. Where I'm at right now, that's all common ground. Where that cursor is common ground. He's not special because he's a trustee. So moving along, you see the common ground area gets a little thin up here, and in some places you would want to walk. But this next area is interesting to me because this area in particular, I don't know who built the wall. It's a beautiful wall. I have no problem with the wall. But no matter who built the wall, it's common ground beyond that boundary line. You know, if they had to put that there to support their house, I'm all for it. I don't care. I'm not making any complaints there. But I am saying that regardless of who built that wall, that's common ground. So moving along, I wouldn't climb up there for the record. I mean, it's not my house. I don't have a desire to be climbing up somebody's wall. There's not a desirable beach back there. But moving on to Paul McKay's, the disputed area, which is behind Paul McKay's house. Everything beyond that line is common ground. Absolutely all of it. That's a road, that's a boundary. In between those boundaries is the road that's supposed to be there. That's the center of the road I was just on. This is a trustee, or this is what he calls the trustee access easement. Franklin County has that listed as a park because it is common ground. It's not a trustee access easement, as he likes to call it. But by his argument, all these little landscaping pieces, like where the thing's hovering over, where that little bridge is next to the cursor, right there, that's all common ground. And if that was part of a trustee access easement, why is he modifying it? Why is he utilizing it for him and his family? I have reports from people that live in that area that say him, his family, and friends have been seen enjoying that area for years. So it's okay for him to enjoy the, quote, trustee access easement, but not the rest of us. It's just more blither blather. So this is another boundary line right here. You can barely see it, but I'm hovering my cursor over it. Everything beyond that boundary line is common ground. No exceptions. It's all common ground beyond. It gets thin, and I'm not one to argue that it doesn't, but Paul does not own this road. That road needs to be completed for us all to use so we can get down there and access the beach area that he's been hoarding to himself for some period of time. And he can't use the argument that he's owned it for 20 years because there are people that tell him to take a hike. And they use it anyway because he knows that there's nothing he can do about it. This is a road. That is that is common ground. It is labeled as park. Just reiterating. I'm also re-voiceovering this because the first one failed while I was doing it live for some reason. So why is all this here? If you're not supposed to access it, why is all this here? Why is all this cheap landscaping present? I don't understand. But I think the answer is easy. There's not a lot to understand. He shouldn't be here. That's the answer. It should be set up correctly for us to access as landowners. He shouldn't be abusing his power to put all this stuff beyond the property lines as if he owns it when he doesn't. This dock is on common ground. All of it. I hope that helps clear some of this up.